This river has been here for thousands and thousands of years. It has flooded for thousands of years. Unfortunately though, over the last number of decades, we've seen an increase in frequency and intensity of rain and storm-related events that's led to significant flooding in the region. The St. John River is integral to the character of New Brunswick and the many communities along its banks. Our work has been varied over the last number of years, but certainly in the last 5, we've spent a lot of time working on climate adaptation. This started with vulnerability assessments for communities along the river, places like Florenceville, Bristol, Heartland, and Woodstock, where we've worked with community members, business members, citizens, municipal governments, provincial governments, and many other actors to understand how they're vulnerable to the changing climate, with a particular attention on flooding. From there, we've moved to adaptation planning, and then most recently have also worked on the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative in Florenceville, Bristol. Municipal natural assets is a way of valuing our natural assets, our forests, our wetlands, and everything else that we have around us to help combat climate change. We are facing a serious uphill battle. The dual crisis of climate change and biodiversity loss are significant not only in this region but across the country. We have over 50 rare and endangered species along this whole watershed, many of them with significant cultural relevance and part of an important ecosystem that makes this area unique. We're going to actually visit a number of sites in and around the Fredericton region here and see what the City of Fredericton and other partners are doing to ensure a healthy and resilient river. This includes riparian restoration projects, green living walls, and talking about how individual neighborhoods and parts of the downtown are responding to flooding. Jody, what can you tell us about the history of flooding along the river in this part of the river?
As you mentioned, the river's been flooding for millennia. I guess we've seen our 4th highest flood in 2018, and that was precursored by the flood in 2008, which was an elevation of 8.36 meters. With our 2nd highest flood in 1973, that was 8.61 meters. And the highest recorded flood we've seen was 1936, and that was 8.9 meters.
Quite significant then, not what we're seeing here today.
Yeah, that's right, today. I think today it's around an elevation of 1.5, 2 meters.
And what happens in the downtown core when flooding happens?
One of the first things that starts happening is we start losing some of our surface parking lots. Then some different intersections through the downtown start to get flooded. And once they start getting flooded, we really see changes in people's access to parking, getting around businesses, and sometimes their homes. So once some of the intersections starting to go underwater, the next thing we see is some of the back streets. Once you get through the first part of downtown, as you start heading towards the hill part, it actually gets a little bit lower. So we see the back part of downtown flood first. Then the next thing that starts happening as the flood rises, we start losing some of the ramps of the bridge. And we know that that's a large commuter route. There's about 100,000 vehicles a day across the bridge. So when we start losing some of the ramps, we really start seeing some significant impacts to the way people move about. The walking bridge, we see about 630,000 crossings a year across the walking bridge. So there's starting to be a large uptake in that, and we know that we're looking at increasing the routes so people can access downtown during those flood periods.
Historically, this area has flooded, and we've obviously settled here and have been settled here for quite some time, and now have to deal with this increased intensity and frequency of storms. What are some of the steps that you guys are taking to help move that forward and address the issues?
In the downtown, we focus on, is there any mitigation things we can take care of? Can we put some valves in? Can we put berms, raise some roads, or increase the size of the storm pipes underground? And to help facilitate this, we've initiated the DMAF program, which is the Disaster Mitigation Adaptation Fund. So we've looked at 4 different streams with this funding to help provide us some backing and funding so we can actually advance these projects quicker than we would have been able to without them. So with these projects, we've looked at key transportation infrastructure. So can we install berms, raise trails, raise roads? How can we get people moving better around the city to get to the businesses in their homes? The next thing is critical municipal infrastructure. So Do we have lift stations that are low in the area? Do we need to keep some operation centers going? How can we improve some of them, or what are some pieces of equipment we need for those things? The next part of that is watershed management. So what are some wetlands that we have that we can improve, maybe acquire? Are there storm pipes that we can install in those outer watersheds? Because not just the flooding we've been seeing increasing, and as you mentioned before, it's also the increased rainfall events. So we do also have some problems in outlying areas. Due to our topography, we have a lot of different watersheds. So there's a lot of different pipes to manage and watersheds. So that's another area we're looking at. And finally, it's trying to mitigate any impacts in neighborhoods. So what can we do to help protect any homes? And I guess I say protect, but it's really mitigate. Because really what we're trying to do is slow down the impacts of those houses. How can we get them to get back in their homes quicker during the flood and really shorten the amount of time that they see impacts from flooding?
Yeah, that's great to hear. And what's interesting is it's a mix of activity, right? There are some mitigation related activities, there's some adaptation related activities. You've got some green infrastructure in there, you've got some gray infrastructure there. You know, there is no silver bullet to address the flooding issue in the city for businesses and for residents, and so you have to take a strategic and integrated approach. And business and institutions are also undertaking a number of activities. When we see leadership from the city and other actors in the region, that really helps to propel others along, right? We build on the good and we're able to leverage that forward.
Finally, one of the things that we see is just people getting prepared and talking about the flood. It's important not to forget the floods because they happen not necessarily every year. So it seems that we have a short memory of some of these things. So all of a sudden they happen again and people weren't prepared. So one of the biggest things is to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, it's really hard to even fathom flooding standing here today on a beautiful fall day as the sun comes up over the river. It just doesn't fathom in our thinking, you know, and for folks that are watching, the water essentially, you know, comes up to a couple of feet below where we're standing to the trail essentially that's just right behind us here. So, well, thank you so much for that, Jody. I really appreciate hearing a bit about the city of Fredericton and what's happening in the downtown core. We look forward to sharing some of these sites with you as we tour around on both sides of the river here and talking with various actors to see what's happening on the ground and what people are doing to ensure a healthy and resilient St. John River and the species, people and wildlife that depend on it.